Welcome to Word Historia, the meeting point for history lovers, our documentary channel. Your support is very important for the continuation of these types of videos. Before starting the video, please don't forget to subscribe and like. History is not just a collection of past dates and events. It is a living, breathing field of study, full of crossroads and moments of profound consequences. Spring of 1945. Europe was approaching the final act of the darkest period in its history. Allied armies had surrounded Berlin from the east and west, and the Third Reich's supposed thousand-year reign had been reduced to rubble. But in the underground bunkers, the Nazi strategists and mad scientists still had one hope: the Wunderwaffe. That is, miracle weapons. But what if history had unfolded just 1 second differently than we know it? What if German physicists, led by Werner Heisenberg, had managed to protect the heavy water plants in Norway and harness the terrifying power at the heart of the atom before the Allies? Today, we pull the most chilling question from the dusty shelves of history. If Hitler had invented the atomic bomb first, what kind of darkness would 1945 have awakened to? If the V-2 missiles that fell on London had contained uranium instead of gunpowder, what kind of world would it be today? Fasten your seatbelts. With World Historia, we're about to embark on a journey into the darkest, untold chapter of history. We generally view World War II as a conflict that, while open and bloody, reached a clear conclusion. But what if one terrible variable had been different? What if the most destructive weapon ever conceived by humankind were to fall into the hands of the most monstrous regime? We must ask this question, not merely for the sake of fantasy, but to better understand the razor-sharp edge upon which our modern world is built. Imagine a world in 1945 that, instead of liberation, signaled the dawn of an endless, radioactive darkness under the Nazi flag. This is not a simple question of military strategy. It questions the very spirit of the 20th century. The Allied victory was hard-won, a massive struggle against a technologically advanced and ideologically fanatical enemy. Nevertheless, it was a victory achieved. Now, let's lift the veil of certainty and step into a parallel timeline, into a reality where there was a different winner in the scientific race. What if the mushroom cloud that signaled the end of the war had first risen over London or Moscow instead of a Japanese city delivered by the architects of the Holocaust? This is a chilling thought, a scenario that forces us to confront the fragility of our own history and the immense risks of that global conflict. The Nazis' technological madness continued not only in the sky but also on land. The greatest artillery weapon humanity has ever seen, the Schwerer Gustav. With its 800mm diameter barrel, it could launch 7-ton shells 47 kilometers away. Imagine this colossal monster, normally used in the siege of Sevastopol, being modified to fire nuclear shells. A Dora gun, positioned on the shores of the English Channel, bombards London or the Allied fleet on the coast with nuclear shells. It is fired not to sink a ship, but to vaporize an entire fleet. Each blast from the giant cannon has the power to wipe a city off the map. The year is 1945. In our timeline, the Third Reich is a ruined wreck, its leader cornered in a bunker in Berlin, its armies in complete retreat on all fronts. The war in Europe is in its final, painful moments. But in the world we are examining, the atmosphere is entirely different. There's an atmosphere of dreadful anticipation, the calm before an unimaginable storm of rage. The whispers from the German laboratories are no longer mere rumors. The Nazis, in fact, had begun the atomic bomb race long before the Allies. When the Uran project, or the uranium project as it's known, was established in 1939, the world's best physicists were in Germany. But Hitler had one mistake. He had dismissed nuclear physics as Jewish science. Geniuses like Einstein had fled to America. But let's assume, in our scenario, that Heisenberg didn't make that famous mistake in his nuclear reactor calculations. In the winter of 1944, the first German atomic bomb was ready in secret tunnels beneath the Alps. Its code name, Die Glocke, the bell, or Schwarze Sonne, the black sun. The story we are about to tell is about the theoretical physics of Einstein, Haber, and Planck, men the Nazis foolishly purged, turned into a weapon of absolute power. This is the story of that power and the dark world it can create. This alternate history requires an appreciation of the context to understand 1945. Nazi Germany was not merely a brutal military force. For a time, it was a center of astonishing technological innovation. Engineers and scientists were pioneers pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible in aviation, rocketry, and armament. They were driven by a totalitarian will demanding great weapons to turn the tide of war. For example, if this atomic bomb had been made by the Germans, it would have been of enormous mass, not light enough to be carried by an aircraft, unlike the Manhattan Project, because the Germans had another technology capable of carrying this destruction. The first man-made object to reach the edge of space. The V-2 ballistic missile. For the people of London, the autumn of 1944 was a nightmare. No planes were visible in the sky, no sirens were sounding, but suddenly a street disappeared. This was Wernher von Braun's masterpiece, the V-2 rocket. Flying at many times the speed of sound, the V-2 was the most advanced ballistic missile ever made. It was undefendable. In the history of the time, V-2s only carried conventional explosives and had not been enough to turn the tide of war. In our history, these weapons were few and far between. In the dark scenario we are about to uncover, one of them arrived just in time to change everything, and plunge the world into a nightmare from which it may never awaken. In February 1945, a V-2 missile fired from the Dutch coast aimed at London. The missile went into freefall at the edge of the atmosphere. Neither British Spitfire aircraft nor anti-aircraft guns could stop it. With the V-2 missiles, the Germans were able to psychologically demoralize the British. The quest for the atomic bomb actually began not in the deserts of New Mexico, but in laboratories in Berlin. In 1938, German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, building on the work of Lise Meitner, achieved nuclear fission. By splitting the uranium atom, they released a tremendous amount of energy. The military implications were immediately apparent to a select few. The German Uranium Club brought together brilliant minds like Werner Heisenberg and began researching the potential of atomic weapons. Here lies the first major what-if of our story. In our timeline, this project was plagued by internal conflicts, lack of resources, and critical scientific miscalculations. But consider a scenario where the project has the highest priority, even greater support than the rocket programs. What if Heisenberg hadn't made a significant error in his calculations about the required amount of uranium-235? What if the Nazi leadership, instead of rejecting nuclear physics as Jewish science, had fully grasped its potential from the outset? In this alternate reality, the German program is progressing with ruthless efficiency. They are seamlessly taking over the heavy water plant in Norway. Uranium ore supply lines from Czechoslovakia remain uninterrupted, and the best scientists work towards a single, terrifying goal, unaffected by bureaucratic hurdles. Although the Manhattan Project in America was a massive undertaking, it was a race against a ghost. They feared the Germans were close to acquiring this weapon, but they weren't sure. In our dark timeline, this fear is justified. Towards the end of October 1944, German scientists working in secret underground facilities achieved a sustainable chain reaction. They solved the complex problems of enrichment and blasting. The device they constructed is perhaps more primitive than the American Fat Man, but no less deadly. A weapon born of genius and hatred. A physical manifestation of the nihilistic drive of Nazi ideology for total domination and destruction, ready for deployment. The moral and intellectual contradictions are striking. A regime that burned books and persecuted the greatest minds of its generation now stands on the verge of harnessing the fundamental power of the universe. They see this not as a deterrent, but as a tool to realize their vision of a world free of enemies. For them, the atomic bomb was the ultimate expression of their will, a divine judgment they were about to deliver to a world they believed to be weak and corrupt. The countdown to doom has begun, not in a remote American desert, but in the dark heart of the besieged and desperate Third Reich. The fate of millions now rests on this terrifying new power. The German atomic bomb wouldn't exist in a vacuum. Imagine this. In February 1945, a V-2 missile launched from the Dutch coast carried Nazi Germany's first nuclear warhead. Target: London, Westminster. The missile goes into freefall from the edge of the atmosphere. Neither British Spitfire aircraft nor anti-aircraft guns could stop it. London was wiped off the map by the first nuclear attack in history. Just one missile was enough to destroy the entire logistical base and morale of the Allies. To be honest, it would be a formidable crown jewel atop an arsenal of other advanced technologies that were years ahead of their time. This, or these amazing weapons, were science fiction come to life. Chief among these was the Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet-powered fighter aircraft. Imagine it's 1945, and you're an Allied bomber pilot accustomed to fighting propeller-driven aircraft. Suddenly, a squadron of these stormtroopers appears, whizzing past your formation at nearly 100 miles faster than even your fastest escorts. They attack impenetrably, their cannons shatter bombers, and they disappear as quickly as they arrived. The Me-262 was a revolution in aerial warfare. It could climb faster, fly faster, and outperform any propeller-driven aircraft the Allies could field. In our known history, its impact was limited due to production delays, fuel shortages, and Hitler's insistence on using it as a bomber. German military intelligence had foreseen the strategic terror of new-generation weapons, like the V-2 ballistic missile and jet aircraft years in advance, and warned Hitler to start the war at a later date, namely 1943. Ironically, Hitler did not accept this and wanted the Polish question resolved as soon as possible. If Hitler had not followed his staff's advice and started the war that day, he would have had many different weapons at his disposal, including the V-2 ballistic missile system and new-generation jet aircraft. But at a time when Germany was on the verge of complete victory, the production of the Me-262 was perfected. Thousands of these Steel Eagles now ruled the skies over the Reich, forming an impenetrable shield against the Allied bombing campaigns that crippled German industry. Air warfare, once the path to victory for the Allies, is turning into a death trap. The skies over Europe once again belong to the Luftwaffe. After a nuclear attack, the Allies want to retaliate from the air, but they face a wall. The era of propeller-driven aircraft is over. They are up against the Messerschmitt Me 262s, reaching speeds of 900 kilometers per second and gliding through the air like ghosts. Hitler made a grave mistake initially by wanting to use this aircraft as a fast bomber. But in our scenario, on the advice of the generals, the Me 262s go into mass production as fighter aircraft in early 1944. The American B-17 Flying Fortresses are helpless against the 30mm cannons of these jets. The sky falls completely under Nazi control. Safe corridors are open for aircraft carrying the nuclear bomb. Now, not Berlin, but Washington and Moscow are the targets. Then there was the V-2 rocket, which truly heralded the space age. The V stood for Vengeance Weapon. It was a 14-ton, 46-foot-high ballistic missile capable of traveling at supersonic speeds and carrying a 1-ton warhead. Unlike the V-1 flying bomb, the V-2 was unstoppable. There was no defense against it. It was striking without warning, The sound of approaching explosions only came after the target had already been destroyed. It had devastated the people of London. It was a pure weapon of terror designed to break the will of a civilian population. In our reality, its use was indiscriminate and strategically ineffective. Its very existence was an act of desperate hatred threatening the civilian population. But now, combine these two technologies in our dark 1945. The Tu-62s secured the airspace, allowing German industry to operate without fear of bombing. Yes, these things came very close to becoming a reality. This allows for the mass production of even more advanced weapons. And most frighteningly, the V-2 rocket is no longer just a revenge weapon carrying conventional explosives. German engineers are working feverishly to solve the final problem of fitting their newly developed atomic devices into the warhead of a new, more powerful rocket, the A9-A10, a two-stage intercontinental ballistic missile designed to reach New York. The ultimate weapon now has a final delivery system. A cold, clear morning in early 1945. Exhausted by years of war and the terror of the recent V-2 attacks, Londoners continue their daily lives with a somber resilience. War reports from the continent are mixed, the Allied advance appears to have stalled, and an eerie silence reigns on the fronts. No one notices the single silent object tracing a curve in the stratosphere, too far for Spitfires and anti-aircraft guns to reach. It travels faster than the speed of sound, a harbinger of doom whose message will only be delivered upon arrival. The target, the heart of the British Empire, Westminster Palace. The explosion was blinding. In a fraction of a second, a new, malevolent sun rises over the Thames. A flash of light, brighter than 1,000 suns, incinerating everything in its path. Big Ben, the Houses of Parliament, Westminster Abbey, they won't be destroyed, they will evaporate. The ensuing shockwave is a physical manifestation of the rage, a whirlwind of force that flattens buildings miles away in every direction. Then a firestorm arrives, depriving the air of oxygen and transforming the ancient city into a raging inferno. Hundreds of thousands of lives are extinguished in an instant. A mushroom cloud, a symbol of this new terrifying era, slowly rises above London's funeral pyre. The psychological impact is even more devastating than physical harm. This is unlike any war you've ever known. This is annihilation. A radio broadcast soon arrives from Berlin. A cold, triumphant voice announces that this is all just a show. She announces that similar weapons are aimed at Moscow, Paris, and once the new long-range rockets are ready, at New York. The terms of surrender are simple: unconditional and immediate absolute obedience. The voice warns that any hesitation could lead to the complete destruction of another capital city. The world was plunged into a state of shock and utter horror. How could the Allies respond? Of course, they couldn't. Their own atomic projects were still months away from completion. Bomber squadrons could not penetrate the shield of the Mi-262 jets to attack launch sites or production facilities. The armies on the ground now faced the possibility of being targeted with tactical nuclear weapons. Allied leadership faces an impossible choice: to continue a war that means the certain atomic destruction of their cities and the slaughter of millions of civilians, or to submit to the worst regime in human history. The hope that had sustained the world through years of darkness was extinguished in a single, radioactive flash. An atomic bomb attack on London would create a devastating shockwave in the global political and military landscape. The will to fight would evaporate. With its capital in ruins and its people facing unimaginable horror, the British government has no choice but to seek peace. On the Eastern Front, a similar ultimatum is given to Stalin. A second atomic device would be detonated, perhaps against the advancing Red Army's supply depots in Poland. And it shows that Germany can and will use these weapons tactically. Faced with the destruction of Moscow and the potential collapse of its entire military structure, even the iron-willed Stalin was forced to sit at the negotiating table. The war in Europe ended. Victory was absolute. Just months ago, Nazi Germany was on the brink of complete defeat, but now it stands as the undisputed master of the European continent. The swastika waves from the Atlantic coast of France to the Ural Mountains. Protected by an ocean, but now facing the imminent threat of intercontinental nuclear missiles, the United States is forced into a tense and fragile ceasefire. The Pacific War may continue for some time, but without its European allies, and with the constant nuclear threat from the emerging German superpower, America's position becomes untenable. The world map is redrawn not with ink, but with radioactive fallout. Life under the victorious Third Reich is a vision of hell brought to life. Without external enemies to check its power, the regime turns all its dreadful attention inward. In our timeline, the Holocaust, halted by Allied liberation, now accelerates with terrifying industrial efficiency. Concentration camps are not liberated, they are expanded. The final solution is brought to its horrific conclusion in all territories under German occupation. The genocidal plans for Slavic peoples, General Plan Ost, are being implemented, and leads to the enslavement and extermination of tens of millions of people. The world transforms into a vast prison ruled by racist ideology and enforced through atomic terror. Scientific progress, art and culture are subjugated to the will of the Nazi Party. Freedom of thought is a crime. History is rewritten to glorify the Reich, and education becomes pure brainwashing. The technological genius who created the atomic bomb was now focused on creating even more advanced weapons to consolidate the Reich's eternal dominance and ultimately settle accounts with the United States. This is a stagnant, ruthless, and paranoid world, living in the persistent shadow of a mushroom cloud, where humanity's greatest scientific achievement has become an instrument of perpetual enslavement. A 1,000-year-old Reich, once the fantasy of a madman, has transformed into a terrifying reality. We need to climb out of this chasm and return to our own timeline, to the world as we know it. The scenario we discovered is a work of fiction, a dark reflection in the mirror of history. Germany's nuclear program failed. WoW-2 German jet aircraft, Me-262 on runway, old footage of Me-262 planes in hangar. The V-2 rockets, though frightening, were not decisive. The war, as we know it, ended with the defeat of Nazism and the victory of the Allied forces, however costly. However, the mere possibility of this alternative route should give us cause for concern. It reminds us that the course of history is not predetermined. It is shaped by choices, failures, scientific races won and lost, and pure chance. The question "what if" is not a pointless game. It is a vital tool for understanding the present. Our world today, with all its flaws and difficulties, is built upon the foundation of that victory in 1945. International institutions, alliances, the very concept of universal human rights, all were born from the ashes of that conflict and in direct opposition to the ideology that Germany represented. We live in a world created by the victors. Exploring the world that losers can create reveals just how much is at stake and how much we could lose if we forget the lessons of the past. The atomic dimension was born in 1945, bringing with it a new existential fear that plagued the Cold War and continues to this day. But this was born in a world that, for a time, was in the hands of nations that, despite all its flaws, were not pursuing global conquest and racial extermination. The story of the German bomb that never existed serves as a lasting, chilling warning. This is proof of the idea that the power of technology is morally neutral. Its capacity for good or unimaginable evil lies entirely in the hands that wield it. Therefore, as we look at the rapid technological advancements of our time, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and new forms of weaponry, we must remember the dark scenario of 1945. We must remember how close humanity came to a different, catastrophic outcome. History is not a finished story. It is a subject that requires continuous study and relearning. The shadow of that alternate timeline reminds us of our duty to be vigilant, to value reason over fanaticism, and to ensure that the tremendous power of human genius is always channeled with wisdom, empathy, and a deep respect for human life. Don't forget to subscribe to the World Historia channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on these alternative history documentaries. Until the next video, at another What If stop in history. Stay with history.